How to go from one house to 50 houses. That's today's show. Let's dive into it. Hey, everyone. Welcome into the Investing in Real Estate podcast. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And this is the show where we teach you how to build passive income and reach financial freedom. And the vehicle that we use to get there is buy and hold real estate. It's not sexy. It's not flashy. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not something that happens overnight. It's slow, it's methodical, and it's actually kind of boring. But I think we believe it's the number one way to build wealth in this country with all of the tax benefits and everything else associated with real estate investing. And so today, this is part 5 of our story because we've gone through the downfall. We've gone through our own mistakes in real estate investing. We've talked about hitting rock bottom and sort of clawing our way back from that, and then positioning ourselves, getting things in line on how, in part 4, on how to take action. So this is part 5 of that series. So what are we going to talk about on today's show?
All right. So we've talked about how we came about investing in real estate, but that's a long journey from having enough real estate from deciding to invest in real estate to having enough that you can quit your day job, right? So if you've listened to this show for a certain amount of time, or if you haven't, you can go back and hear Clayton explain the freedom number so many times. The freedom number is the amount of money you think that you can live on so that you wouldn't need to have a day job. You can then have that amount of money coming in monthly, right? From passive income. For us, we use real estate, could be anything, right? And so how you arrive at your freedom number is you take your budget, your living expenses now, and then figure out what you need. And then, we always like to pad it because we don't want to live, if we're really free, we're not living by a budget, right? So we hit our freedom number in 2017. And we want to talk to you about how we did it because we only really bought our first investment property at the end of 2013. So from that one property to our freedom number, which now is close to, if you round, it's 50 houses or 50, well, it's 50 properties, 50 doors. And I won't parse it out because some of them are multis, some of them are duplexes, right? Okay. So anyway, you get the point. So how did we get there? We didn't just have enough cash to buy 50 houses and then boom, that we're there.
Right, because I want people to, if you're starting out watching this show and you're thinking yourself, oh, it's like watching an episode of Oprah. It's easy for Oprah to do, right? You get that moment where you're like, well, no, it's not. I was in debt, right? I had $75,000 in debt and I had no credit and I had all my bank accounts frozen. So if I can do it, if I can claw out of that mess, then anyone can do it. It's really, and people want to say, well, how quickly can you do it? We did it in about 4 or 5 years. It's a matter of how hungry you are to get it done. So if you're not hungry and you just want to pick up one property every few years and you're okay with that, and you're okay driving 2 hours to and from work every day and not spending more time with your kids, and then by the time they graduate college or they're off to college, that's when you want to be able to have that financial freedom. Great. But if you are hungry like I was, and I said, no, I want to do this now, and I was able to retire at 40 years old, I wanted to do it earlier so that my knees would work, right? So that if we wanted to go on a trip and I could climb some mountain with my family, I could still do it. I wouldn't be 70 years old by the time that I achieved that.
What's with you thinking your knees aren't going to work at a certain
time?
Well,
you always hear people getting their knees and hips replaced, right? So it's just like I remember my grandmother getting her hip replaced. I'm like, how do you get a hip replaced? As a kid, you're like, what? How does that happen?
Sure have some limiting beliefs about age.
No, what I'm saying is,
you're going to break down in a number of decades.
No, I'm going to be vibrant. I'm going to be windsurfing. I'm going to be like one of those guys in those squirrel suits, that jumps off the side of a mountain.
Like,
what's that guy?
Years old.
The most interesting man in the world. I drink Dos Equis. So, you think about that. I come back to Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, that he wrote.
Right, but let's not perpetuate any more limiting beliefs about age. I really don't think that that's useful at all.
Okay, but it is true that as we age, our bodies tend to not be as vigorous. I mean, there's a reason that you don't see any 70-year-old quarterbacks in the NFL, right? So yes, you can be on the Tom Brady plan for life, which is great. He's 40 years old, but let's be honest, I don't think he's going to be playing football when he's in his 50s, right?
Christiane Northrup's mom skis at 90. So, okay, I think that everyone who's listening to this believes in themselves enough to believe that they're going to be able to, my dad listens to this on the treadmill. He's in his 60s.
Okay, so my point is that as Tim Ferriss My point is, if don't keep getting interrupted, is Tim Ferriss points out in the 4-Hour Work Week that why not plan for your life now, to live your life now, creating enough passive income today when you're 35 or 42 years old, so that you have 10 rental properties that are producing enough cash flow now so you can leave that 9-to-5 job. You can go climb Mount Kilimanjaro with your family. You can travel and backpack through Europe with your 10-year and 12-year-old kids. You don't have to wait till you're 65 when you have enough income or enough retirement money in place to go start doing these adventures. We've talked before about that Fidelity commercial that we saw recently, or it was like Charles Schwab or something. Like, they're like, we did it. We can now retire. And they're out on a boat, and they're finally actually able to go on their adventure when they're 70 years old. My point is that it depends on how hungry you are. Why not live for today and get these things in place today to start your journey?
Right. And I also think it's a matter of not just hunger, but creativity. Because once you decide that you want to own passive assets, it's a matter of finding all manner of ways. So we've talked about how, my father taught me to make a balance sheet. So we did that. So we understood what we had to work with right off the bat. So when Clayton decided, okay, these people on a plane told me they invest in this suburb of Detroit, I want to do that too. So what he did was booked a plane ticket and found a realtor and said, I want sort of more off-market, distressed properties, and I want them to rent for about this much. So he understood what he wanted. He had no real team in place or even peers to help him out. He just was searching around on the internet and decided, I'm going to do this. So he went to Detroit and he said, I want to buy these properties. Now, we knew what we had to work with. We decided to take some money that was in a Fidelity trading account in exchange traded funds, and we sold it. We also had some Apple stock, remember? Clayton was a big fan of Apple stock back then.
Right.
And so we sold all of that, and we bought those first 2 properties cash, and then we paid a contractor cash to rehab them. And they were renting in about 5 or 6 months, I want to say, right?
Right, exactly. So it didn't take very long, but again, I did things in a way that I probably wouldn't today, right? I went to this area. I didn't know, what I was looking at, right? I met with a distressed property realtor who
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that is, to be honest with you, because most realtors, most times, are going to be selling you a property at a retail price, right?
But this guy was pretty with it. And the reason you trusted him was because you found an article about that market and finding off-market properties in that market. And he was a realtor who was watching that article and commenting on the posts. And you were like, okay, this guy gets it. Now, of course, not everyone in real estate does. Most people are focused on retail. But you understood that this guy understood the off-market game. And so he took you around. He was very generous with his time.
Right.
And, we were lucky that we could start with 1 or 2 with cash. Now, of course, not everyone can do that, but you go to your balance sheet and see what you have there that can turn into cash. And we'll talk about that further, because most have in your asset column, you have a home, probably with some equity. You probably have some stock accounts. You may have an IRA account. You may have a 401k account, right? All of that can be transferred into cash and then transferred into a higher performing asset. So that's exactly what we did. So we found some cash by way of stocks, cashed it out, and bought these properties. Now, do you remember how we had those, those 2 properties. It was like the sweet nectar of success when those checks started to roll in, because they both rented for around $900 a month. So we were getting like $1,800 a month, and we're like, wow, this is amazing that this actually worked. So then where'd we go next? Do you remember?
Oh, so you want to skip past? Okay, you don't want to talk about those assets at all. You want to just kind of skip past. Like, I
What
was going to
assets?
talk. Well, I was going to talk about getting those properties. I mean, you don't want to talk about that at all?
I don't understand what you're.
Well, yes, just calling up a distressed property realtor, like, that's not how I would do it today. That I don't even, like, they don't really exist. And I was able to get short sales and foreclosures at the time, which also don't really exist anymore. And I also overpaid. I paid a little bit more than I would have wanted. I also over upgraded those properties. I hired a contractor who then became part of my team. So these are all pieces that are very important to that initial puzzle. It's like making sure you have a really strong team in place. You can't just if you go into your backyard, we have a lot of
Well,
videos.
okay, but I think you're saying your way was not the right way. I'm not going to say that it wasn't the right way. You had the luxury of traveling during the week and figuring this out on yourself, on your
Right.
own. You didn't know that there was such thing as turnkey real estate providers. You didn't know that you could find someone who would help you through this process. You thought you had to do it yourself. So you had the luxury of time that most people don't. Most people
Right.
can't go Monday through Friday to a market and find their own team and build it from the ground up, right? And so that's sort of how you came up with this whole idea of turnkey real estate. But
And I got very lucky. I should say there was an element.
right.
We were watching this Letterman interview last night, and he was talking about the element of luck. I mean, I got very lucky because the contractor was actually a family friend, so I didn't get burned. I didn't I've heard horror stories from people that have emailed me that have I hired a contractor, they took my money and ran, or I did this, and now the property's vacant for 8 months. I haven't got anybody in there yet because I don't know what I'm doing. So there's all of those elements of luck that kind of came into place for us. And yes, they started cash flowing. So those were our first two in that Midwest market that we talked about, that flight to New Zealand, I think on a previous one of this 5-part series. So that's kind of the gestation for where this all started. Those first two, though, were with cash. You're right. So then we're sitting there saying to ourselves, great, these first two we got with cash that we had in the bank. My credit is ruined. We don't have any extra cash sitting around right now. What the heck are we going to do? And that's a common question that we get from people who get those first two properties and they want to start doing the snowball effect. What am I going to do? We could have, here's one option, right? We could have refinanced those initial properties, perhaps.
Yeah.
And we may have gotten maybe 80% of what we put into it, right? Because we're not talking about $1 million homes here, San Francisco, where you're going to see this huge appreciation from where I bought it and rehabbed it. Those are like a huge spread, right? So maybe we would have gotten, if we all in for 52,000 on some of these properties, maybe we would have gotten 40 back if we did a refinance, or 37, which is still good, right? We would have gotten 37 we could have worked with, but we didn't do it that way. We did it another way for our third property, right?
Right. So we looked again at our asset column. We had no more cash to work with. And then we had cars, houses, and we had IRAs from old jobs that we had had before. We had taken their 401ks and converted them into IRAs. And so Clayton heard on a podcast this person who said that they had transferred their IRAs into self-directed IRAs and bought real estate with them. And he came home one day and was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a pain. I always sort of have this fixed mindset, no, our IRAs are in exchange traded funds. They're doing okay. And he goes, listen to this episode. So I listened to it and I started to sort of read about the philosophy of it. And then I was completely on board. So we took our IRAs and we bought, we bought two, one in each IRA. And both of those then started to cash flow. Now, we've taught you this method in other episodes of the podcast. So you have to remember that these houses cash flow inside the IRA. So we cannot actually live on that money. So that money doesn't necessarily translate into our freedom number because both of those properties rent, but that money goes straight back into the IRA. So that's future money, but it still was increasing our ownership of real estate. It still was towards that goal, right?
Right. So then you're adding in, we don't get the tax benefits. We've done whole episodes on the IRA and, should you buy it within an IRA or outside of an IRA? And there's huge benefits to buying it in it. There's also huge benefits to buying it outside of it. So it just depends on if you've got that money sitting there and it's not performing for you, like it wasn't performing for us, then there's a way to make it actually perform at a really high level, 10 to 12% return. It was a no-brainer for us to use our self-directed IRA to start purchasing real estate.
Right. So Tom Wheelwright makes the point, you don't want to finance properties inside of an IRA, but if you have the cash to purchase outright, usually that's a better investment than what else you're going to do with it, which is put it in the stock market. So that's how we did that.
So then we've gotten these properties in the self-directed IRA. We used some money from our stock account to purchase our first, so cash, right, to purchase our first few properties. And now we're at 3 or 4 properties at this point. And I had learned the skill of wholesaling in this amount of time. I started studying and learning and taking a course on wholesaling and being mentored by my mentor, Tom Kroll, who we've talked about here on the show. You can go back and listen to those episodes as well. And I started doing wholesaling in the state of New Jersey, and not for the benefit of keeping properties myself, but flipping them to investors who wanted to spend $200,000 on a rehab. And I didn't have that kind of cash at that time. So
he tried, believe me.
I tried.
Many of these properties he found and was like, can we do this? But we're not experts at, construction and, like having our own team of we only just do projects around our own house. So doing that here in New Jersey when we didn't really have a team in place like we do in the markets we work in now, we were just really green at the time, and we were like, oh, I don't know, can we do that? And the holding costs here in New Jersey were so high. Also, in New Jersey, it costs about $70 a square foot to rehab a house. And that's 3 times as much as it costs in the markets we work in now. So most of the markets we're in, Ohio, Detroit, Ohio's not a market, it's a state, but you know what I mean? With the states Florida. We work in, Florida, Indianapolis, Ohio, Michigan, it costs us about $15 to $20 per square foot. So not only were the taxes super high to hold those, but the rehab costs were so high, and we just didn't have a full team in place. So we didn't do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of other reasons too in New Jersey too. There's like, getting certificates of occupancy for properties. There's all this kind of, bureaucracy involved in New Jersey and rehabbing and doing all of that. And so I was flipping them, and I was making a good profit from flipping those to investors who wanted to actually spend 8-9 months working on a 3,000 square foot home.
Most of them were contractors.
Right.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of contractors. And wholesaling is a whole strategy. Again, we've spent whole episodes talking about that here, so we're not going to go into the strategy, but it involves a lot of marketing. I spent thousands of dollars in marketing, sending postcards and all that kind of stuff, being on the phone nonstop. And because I had my weekend job, I'd be making like 40, 50 phone calls a day, talking to sellers, being hung up on. People were like, how'd you get my number?
Call me again.
Never call me again. I'm calling. I'm like, okay, I just wanted to see if you're interested in selling your house. So you're like learning the lingo and trying to learn all of that. And I put in the time, I was hitting the streets. I was out knee deep. And the properties we rehab, the properties that actual investors rehab are not pretty at all. You're knee deep in, black mold. God knows what you're knee deep in. The stuff that I've seen in properties in New Jersey and all over the country would make your hair stand on end. But the point is, you're ripping all of that crap out. So anyway, wholesaling, I started using some of those strategies to find our next round of properties. So I was in New Jersey, and I said, you know what, let me just send a few postcards to like areas that I'm familiar with in Pennsylvania, and I spent a couple thousand. I sent it to Reading, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, where I grew up, and also up in like the Poconos near where we had our getaway house. And got some calls, I was like, okay, and made some deals with some sellers who were like, look, this house needs a ton of work. Probably like $15,000, $20,000 in work. I don't want it anymore. I've inherited this thing. Do you want it? And we'd make a deal. I'd send them cash. We'd close. I'd buy it. And then I had to go in with a contractor. So the next round of stuff I was able to find discounted with some minimal cash in order to add those to our portfolio. They weren't beautiful, and they needed a lot of work. And we did some upgrades and improvements over the next like 1 to 2 years on each of these wholesale properties we found.
Right. Again, these were not turnkey because you were making it your mission Monday through Friday to find these deals for us. I remember he was working so hard, and he was always around and always on the phone, that our son Miles was about 4 at the time, and he had this little Spider-Man phone, and he was playing around with it, and he was like, hi, yeah, I a cash buyer, because he was imitating you because he heard you saying that so much.
So many times, like, oh yes, I want to buy this property. Like, it's a full-time job. When someone says they want to get started in wholesaling, like, oh, I'm like, well, how many hours do you work in your 9-to-5 job? Like, oh, I'm there at 8 a.m. until about 6 p.m. at night. I'm like,
that's going to be tough, right? It depends what that job is. If they sit there watching a security camera and they have the time to be on their phone, that's one thing, right? So I don't want to make judgment about other people's lives, but again, this is not turnkey. Most turnkey investors probably don't understand that their properties did start as wholesale finds, because there is somebody out there identifying these off-market properties for us then to sweep in and buy and rehab for you, right? That's where it starts. But if you don't have the time or the interest or the hunger to go out and be a wholesaling, that's not for you. It was, again, it was just for us because Clayton had the time and the humility and the desire to do it. And we had a handful of properties, and he really wanted more. So,
right. Using the wholesale strategy is smart because it's not using a retail, realtor strategy. If realtors were to bring me the same properties, they'd probably be $20,000 more. And then if I have to put $20,000 worth of work into them, then we're over the retail price of the property. So that's why, like my team now, I've got a team that has to go out knee deep in these properties and is walking through, all kinds of disaster homes that we then have to buy, fix, and rip apart. So, you know, uh,
right.
I was doing it all
Yeah.
myself. Yeah. So that's the wholesale strategy that's enabled us to get our next round of properties.
Right. So again, in telling this story, I want to reiterate, we're not telling everybody to do these things, but we're trying to inspire creativity in you so that you understand what your path would be, because we didn't use any one tool. We used all the tools. So, not all of them are going to work for you unless you want to, but a good handful of them will work for you in a way that, we work for us because we commit to them. So after we had that handful of properties, some in an IRA, some owned in cash. At that time, we didn't even own an LLC, which was dumb of us. But we then went to the 401k. So again, it was another sort of story where Clayton heard it on a podcast and came home, and I was like, oh no, we're not.
Actually, no, I didn't. I heard it from my one of my coworkers at Fox News on the Fox business side. Stuart Varney actually
Oh,
said
yeah?
he's a real estate investor. He owns properties all over the country. And we got to talking. He said, well, I'm a real estate investor now, a small one, but he said, a strategy most people don't even know they can do, and I do it every year, is to borrow from my 401k to purchase real estate every year. I said, I'm sorry, what? I thought you don't touch your 401k. It's a sacred cow. You don't never touch that thing because you'll get penalties. And,
Right.
and he said, no. Borrowing from it, not withdrawing from it, but borrowing from it. You don't get any penalties, and you're paying yourself back, and you get the double whammy of it. The fact that it's your own bank, it's your own money. And then when you're paying yourself back, you get to exceed the federal allotment per year. So what was it?
Because you pay yourself in interest. Right.
Right. So
a market-based interest, whatever the current interest is, you match it and pay yourself back. So not only.
So is it like the cap, like 16.5? You can pay yourself back more than the amount that you would be federally capped at, because you're paying yourself that interest back. So I was like, wow. Okay. So then I maxed that out. I went to Fidelity, took like 3 minutes on their website to manage my 401k, and I withdrew or borrowed $50,000.
Yeah.
And
the rules are 50,000 or up to 50%.
Right. So then we went and bought a property or two with that money, right?
We did a few things with it, actually. We borrowed every year for about 3 or 4 years. Now we don't have that option because neither of us has a 401k with a day job. But we tried to evaluate what that money was worth. And so we had a car payment. We used part of it to pay off, I think it was like a $12,000 car payment, and the rest of it to buy an off-market property. And so that was one loan, and that ended up being a great deal because we were, instead of paying the car company the interest, we were now paying ourselves interest in that loan, right? So no more. So I've turned that kind of not favorable liability into a favorable liability because it's to us. And then, we bought a house. The rules, according to your custodial company like Fidelity or Scottrade or whoever has it, are different for how often you can borrow. If you take the full amount, usually there's like a 18-month period before you can do it again, or you can take a partial amount of it. So we did that several times, and then just set it as a direct deposit from his paycheck to pay that money back. So you have to, work out what you can pay back. But the goal is that you find a property that's cash flowing more than your debt to yourself, and then you are then paying yourself back as the lender, but then also benefiting from the cash flow of this performing asset. Once that loan is paid back, you don't have to pay anything else. Now that cash flow is totally yours.
The bottom line on that 401k option is that most people they're like, oh, I don't have any money. And actually, if you start to look under your pillows, you look into your IRA, you look in your 401k, you realize you actually have some ability to pull money out and borrow from it. And this is your own money.
Yeah.
It's not sacred. In fact, I'd rather have the money out of the stock market completely and be able to use it to buy an actual cash flowing asset, something that's real, tangible, that is adding to your net worth. Stock market is not adding to your net worth, right? It's not adding to your overall,
It's nominally adding.
It's nominally, but you're not building that passive income and the cash flow. You're not turning it into a golden goose, right? Where it's producing on a regular basis. So a lot of people have this money. They don't think that they do. And if you just start being creative about the ways in which you can pull it out, then you can start to get that first and second property and be able to leverage that first and second property and roll it into your third and fourth and fifth. It's a very simple process.
Right. Because when you look at your balance sheet and you see your house and your car and your stock accounts, you put in the number for your house is market value, right? It's not like your house is worth $500,000 and then that means you have $500,000. Of course you don't. It's worth that much. So whatever you have in equity, most people don't understand, you can take it out and use it if you get a home equity line of credit. That was our second strategy now. So we used cash from the stock account, then we went to the IRA, then we did some wholesale deals, which were sort of cheap cash deals, right? Then we went to the 401k, and then we went to the home equity line of credit. Again, this was another one of Clayton's ideas, which at first I was like, no, because I liked the idea of not having debt attached to my house. But then when we realized we could get this really low interest loan attached to our house, and then turn that low interest loan into a high performing asset, I did like the idea of that, because most of our houses on average are about 10% return, between 10 and 12. So obviously if I can get a 1.99% loan on my house and get a 12% return on that money, that's a no-brainer, right? So what we did was we went to the bank, we told them how much equity we had. They did send an independent appraiser. And then they said, okay, you can have home equity credit, this amount of money. We took that money, then we bought more properties, and you can buy those properties in your own name or in your own LLC. They don't have to be attached to anything. And then that is cash flow that you get to keep, that adds to your freedom number.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so the Heloc strategy, people email us all the time and they say, okay, should I take money out of my primary residence in order to purchase rental real estate? And the answer is, it's up to you, right? But this is we're in a debt system right now, right? We're not in a gold standard anymore. The government is run on debt. And this is how we operate. The government wants you to operate on debt. And the banks are giving you their money based on the equity in your primary residence. Now, you could go and buy a boat, but I think that would be stupid with that Heloc money. You could go and sink it into random stuff that you don't know about. Or you could actually buy performing cash flowing assets that then are adding to your net worth column. So now the bank is giving you the ability to go out and buy another house with your house, the equity in your house. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. So you and I both, we use that strategy where we paid down debt.
Yeah.
We wrote a whole book on it, as you pointed out. We wrote a whole book on how to pay off your mortgage in 5 years using your Heloc. So we split it, right? I think we had like 80,000 to work with or something. And we kind of split it in half, and we used half to pay down our primary mortgage, pay it off.
Right.
And then we used the other half to invest in real estate and buy additional properties. So we were using it in tandem. And I think that was probably one of the best strategies we've ever done.
Yeah, it was amazing. Now, I want to say there are two things that make this strategy a tiny bit less favorable now than when we started doing it in around 2014, 15, I guess.
13, yeah. Something
is one, the interest rates are higher. I was just in the bank yesterday. So we got those introductory interest rates at 1.99%, which was awesome. And now I looked at the sort of advertised rates on home equity line of credit at the bank yesterday, and they're like 4%. Even introductory rates are like hovering around 3 for just the first year. So those interest rates are based on market indexes, and interest rates are higher now. The economy has recovered since then. So you want to watch those interest rates keenly. But, it's just a simple game of a teeter-totter math. Like, is that interest rate lower than what you're paying on other debt? Probably if you have credit card debt, you're paying between 12 and 20%, which sucks, right?
Right.
So wouldn't it be better than to pay that on a home equity line of credit than to the credit card rate, which is compound interest, right? So
Right.
that's something to consider very seriously. Another thing, though, is now the interest on a home equity line of credit is no longer a tax deduction. So if you take advantage of the tax deduction on your interest on your primary mortgage, that's obviously more favorable than paying interest on a home equity line of credit. So we would have to reconsider that now based on the new GOP tax law, which is about 3 weeks old at this point. So we're not saying definitely you should do that, but it ended up being a great strategy for us for the time and place that we were.
Right. So it's a great strategy using your home equity line of credit to expand your portfolio of properties. And also then you can get lines of credit on the properties that you purchase, right? So you can then further and pull out more equity on those properties
Yeah.
and begin to leverage and to pull out the money that you currently have in these properties if you want. Now, most of the properties we own now free and clear because I like the idea of the full benefit of the cash flow. But there are
Right.
some that we said, you know what, we're going to do a package of properties. We bought some, I think a group of like B class properties. They were definitely B class that we added to our portfolio. Most of our properties are C class, but we added a group of B class. They were a little bit more expensive, and we did a loan on them. We got some hard money, private money, and put together on a package of, what was it, 8 properties or 10 properties?
It was 8. It was
8
supposed to
properties.
be 10, and they threw out 2 because they didn't appraise for their minimum value, which kind of sucked because those properties cash flowed the same. They still do. In fact, the people who ended up buying them still make the same amount as we would have made,
Yeah.
but the lenders sort of live and die by those appraisals, and that's what really kills me, because once you're used to working in turnkey properties and then you bring a lender into the mix, it's just so much more red tape, and you're like, oh, why did I do this? It ended up being a great deal for us because I think if I look at I think that loan is at about 4.25%, and we added 8 properties to our portfolio in one fell swoop. Now, we did have to come up with 30% cash, so we saved for that for several months. And it is not easy. If you've ever secured a mortgage, they ask for
Oh,
basically everything but urine samples. And
right.
so, but I think it took me about 4 months to secure that. But then those 8 properties cash flow over $5,000, and our debt service on them is $2,000. So that added $3,000 to our freedom number right out of the gate. But it also added to our liabilities column. So we try and overpay that mortgage so that we can, play the amortization game. But yes, that was a great strategy. Again, though, as interest rates change and now the economy's changing, we're going back to the point where lenders are getting tough again. Don't you feel that's sort of the way things are going right now? No, that's
Well,
not
I
your
mean,
sense of it.
what, that lender is getting tougher for lending right now? I mean, look,
Yeah.
banks, well, it's still difficult. So when people talk about like this housing bubble, I say you're wrong because the data doesn't show it. Maybe you have areas of Silicon Valley that are overinflated and so forth, but I mean, it's still incredibly difficult to get a loan. And so you have to have a couple of things in place. We've talked about with to have there be a housing bubble. You have to have exuberance, like craziness. You have to have, these rising prices, and you have to have demand. Guess what? The demand and the rising prices are kind of going hand in hand. And there's not a lot of disagreement right now between realtors and the people and the price people are willing to pay. They're kind of like, yeah, that's the price. I don't think that's ridiculous. I'll pay $700,000 for that house in New Jersey because that's what it is. They're not saying 900. What?
Yeah.
they're in alignment, and there's a lot of excitement about, there's not as much exuberance because it's difficult to get loans. So I don't know. I don't think it's not like it was in 2006 when anyone could get a loan.
With a pulse.
Now it's difficult to get a loan. However, there is a movement right now in Congress beyond the GOP tax bill to loosen some of the regulations around lending. And banks, Jamie Dimon saying this, JP Morgan saying, look, we don't want to go back to lending to people without a job. He said, but there are some areas where we can see some loosening, where there are people who would qualify for a loan who are otherwise being ignored right now. And we know that they've got a stable job, they've got a good income, they
Yeah.
have the ability to pay it back. And those people are not being served right now. So maybe we should loosen things a little bit in order to allow those people to get a loan. But
Now, I misspoke on that loan that we have, and we used Lima One Capital for this. Although there are a lot of, you call these sort of hard money lenders or private lenders, they're not regulated by the SEC. That's why, so that it's not, I mean, it's very much the process of getting a loan. They need all your bank statements and all that kind of stuff. But their interest rates are usually somewhere between like a private money lender that you'll meet at a RIA meeting who will give you money for 12%, and the bank, which is, right now around 4%. So we paid for that 7.25%.
okay.
They now have adjustable rate mortgages. They didn't 2 years ago when we did this. So you can find a little bit more favorable terms, but we locked it in at 7.25. And we actually, because those properties cash flow $5,000 and the loan is around $2,300, we put an extra $1,000 every month. And so we can towards principal so that we can knock down that loan, because that's just cash, right? That those properties are cash flowing, and I want to knock down the overall amount of money. Like my dad says, is just paying money for money. So I want to pay as few. How would I say that? As little money for money.
Right.
A few money for money. A few money.
Well, and also if we had to do it again, I don't know that we would, because the prepayment penalty, look, there's a prepayment penalty. And so I want to be able to pay these things off as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah.
I would have just as soon not done it this way and paid cash, and then we could pay them off more quickly because the interest that we're paying. So so again,
yeah,
you got to weigh these things. And also the properties themselves have to hit that minimum number for like a private lender, like 75,000.
Right. And you pay for the appraisal on all of these properties. So it's about $500 per property to pay for that appraisal. And so we paid for 10 appraisals and only got 8 properties. So that was $1,000 that we just sort of kissed goodbye. So that also sucked. The prepayment penalty is on a sliding scale. So you can only pay 20% of the principal balance every year for 5 years. And then after 5 years, they feel good enough that they've made enough interest on you that you can then pay it off. So it's not terrible. There's no prepayment penalty. I think we only have like 2 years left of that. But if someone's really looking to add to their freedom number and they saved 30% and then they did a portfolio loan like this and say that, they maybe were a little bit tighter on their freedom number, these numbers are great for anyone, right? Like, you're now cash flowing $5,000. You have a $2,000 debt. That's $3,000 we added to our monthly income. So it ended up being, in comparison to the other ways that we've purchased, it was more expensive. But just for the purpose of adding to our portfolio, I think it wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah. And it did take 4 months, and you were ready to pull your hair out a number of times.
Well, I've never secured a loan that I didn't cry.
Right.
So that's how we got to, I want to say after we had that package, we were close to 30 properties. Now, everything that we've acquired since then to get to that 50 number, we've been able to save and buy cash one at a time in the last, I want to say 2.5 years. The next thing we're looking to do, because we found this awesome package that we talked about a couple of months ago, we told you about this deal we got in New Jersey, is to work with this same guy and do seller financing with him, because he's willing to sell off his, I think it's a package of like 50 he's still got, and he's willing to sell off brackets of 10 for seller financing. So we're all about that. And that's just, again, another trick to add to your portfolio. So this is by no means an exhaustive list about how people acquire real estate. It's just the tools that we've used to get here, right?
Yeah. I mean, the investors that we work with, like at our company, Morris Invest, I've heard all kinds of creative ways. We borrowed it from grandma. I'm a partner with my father. We took money out of our business. We did this. We sold off a Subway franchise. We had one of our investors actually, he said, the properties I'm able to
I
get with,
remember that guy. Yeah.
the properties I'm able to get with you guys get me like between a net 10 to 12%. He's like, I only get like a 5% return on a Subway franchise if I'm lucky, and I have to work like 18 hours a day. He's like, so I'm done with that.
Yeah.
So I've heard all manner of ways in which people are like leveraging their contacts, their friends, their money on hand to be able to purchase real estate.
Yeah. It was a Subway sandwich, right? Not like the Subway train.
Right. Subway franchise, Subway restaurants. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. That is part 5 of our story, the way in which we've acquired real estate. We're still doing all sorts of crazy ways of acquiring real estate and adding to our portfolio as we have the cash available. And we obviously had the huge tax bill this year and everything we had to go through. So we were sort of cash poor at the end of the year as we were setting up different things and moving money around so we wouldn't get hit with a huge tax burden. But as this year unfolds, we'll be acquiring more real estate on a regular basis as well. So I'd love to hear your comments and let us know how you've been acquiring real estate, anything that you would add to this. Any final thoughts, any final words?
No, but I hope that this inspires you to figure out as a team how you can find more performing assets in your existing assets. That's just what it's all about. We want to help other people figure out how to do it their way, just by being transparent about our way. So
exactly.
We welcome your questions as well.
That's right. So in the meantime, we'll be back with another episode of Investing in Real Estate. Now go out there, take action, and become a real estate investor. And if you're not already a subscriber, please do share this with somebody you love that you think could actually benefit from achieving financial freedom in his or her life. We'll see you next time, everyone.